Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everyone is well on this wonderful Sunday. Give me 1 second here, folks. Just right there we go. Oh, I hope everyone is well today, and I hope that the audio is coming in through nicely. Let me just double check settings here, real quick. And yep, okay, we are good to go then. All seems well. So, even though I am streaming at my regular time, I thought that given how busy I was yesterday and Friday with this sort of back to back training with OSHA and mandatory safety compliance, that I wouldn't want to give you a half assed, half cocked kind of lecture. I've done that maybe once or twice in the past, and I really do not like doing that. So, we're going to instead try and hold ourselves, myself, to a much higher standard. So, we're going to do that in the future from now on out. That's what we're going to be doing. So instead, today, I thought that it would be nice to have a sort of casual catch up. I had a couple of things on my mind that I wanted to share with you all. And let me make sure that everyone knows that we're live. Yep, we're good to go. Thank you for scheduled tweets. And I wanted to share those things. And then I also wanted to give some or respond to some commentary, or at least from the comment section, that were about the narration I did about sort of the observations on the road. So, it's nice to see so many regular names and faces in the chat, whether it's Mr. American Populist, Vingel, and so many other great friends. Hello, all. Hello, everybody. And so that's what we're going to do today. I'll take your questions. We'll hang out for maybe 90 minutes or so, and then I'll outline some of the things that I've got planned, because I'm going to be doing a lot more writing in the future, because I've kind of figured out the key to my productivity here that I quite enjoy. Um, Anglo Ortho says Mr. Rogers style. That's very nice. Well, I wasn't aiming for it, but it's certainly too hot to sort of dress nice the way that I have been going to liturgy in the morning. I've sort of taken after someone else who's also my age, who also dresses nice, although he gets all of his stuff from Goodwill. I should probably start thrifting more, to be perfectly honest. But speaking of which, on Friday, I went to his chrismation. He was recently chrismated into the church, so it was very nice to see him and get more, I guess, welcomed into it. One of the cool things that recently had happened was one of the deacons had given me a book to read, which I haven't read in like 10 years. It was a copy, his personal copy from him as a kid, of Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. And I have not read it since high school. So it'll be a good time, I think, to reread that with a different set of eyes now that I'm much older. But already, like less than 3 minutes in, we're getting geopolitical questions. Someone asking me about what's currently going on in Azerbaijan and Armenia. Do I think that war is returning? I know that the ceasefire had been broken and that there were some troop movements, but I do not know enough at the current moment to give an answer whether or not war is returning. It does beg the question, though, if the CTSO will be invoked. So yeah, we'll see. But on the subject, before we get into any more in-depth questions, was that there are maybe like 3 things that kind of came across my mind that I wanted to sort of talk about and address today. So the first one was about a lot of the comments that came in from the recent narration I did for Down the Capillaries, which I'm sorry for everyone that got biology recommendations afterwards. I didn't put arteries or capillaries within the video description, but the title kind of will skew things anyways. But I thought that'd be a good contrast that about the arteries and veins of the interstate highway system and freeways that travel so much freight and goods across the country, that really these old FM and county roads are more so the capillary veins of the United States. But in a way, they're still just as equally important. But the comments were really receptive, and Conscious Caracol had messaged me in private, and he had mentioned to me that I think what we need, just in general, not just on the right, but just in the West in general, are more storytellers and more people that aren't going to dive straight into the analysis, but are at least willing to provide the sense of a narrative and the sense of where I come from and how I'm grounded in what shapes my perspective and how I construct this worldview to how I talk about the world and how I view it. And I think that that's something that he also does very well. Ernst does a really good job. He has a culture series that he goes through all the time, where he interviews various people within South Africa, which is just as diverse as a lot of other Western states. He interviews Indians, Zulus, fellow people of his fellow kind, Anglo residents there, and it's of course something to definitely keep in mind. Um, but if there's an issue, let me go edit that with the ads, because I typically do not leave them monetized while we're live, but I'll take care of that. But yeah, and as Charlemagne points out, he's going to go mow the lawn now, which is peak white identity in America, which is always nice. If you have the chance to go mow a lawn, there's nothing that can be more proud of. But yeah, no, there's lots of things to do. And that was the one thing I think we're going to continue. That's why I said on the community post the other day that I wanted to make sure that in the future we have more of these stories and such. So that's what we're going to do, in fact, is just focus more on these stories and focus more on our own perspective in our lives. Because I thought that was something really, really important, that our day-to-day experiences do shape our worldviews, and I think that we should talk more about it. And I think that reflects a lot of what I also said at the Shieldings event, which is that we need to humanize ourselves. We need to be more personal, which is why we need to do a greater job at making sure that what we're talking about online aren't just these ephemeral, abstract political ideas, when we are very much, in fact, people that want to accomplish things. So that's something that also came to my mind, and I think that I'm going to continue that. Which sort of segues into the second part of what I wanted to discuss, was productivity. So on a whim yesterday, because I spent most of the day in the town where I work, which is also the same town that has my church, which is about 30 some odd minutes away from where I live. And I thought to myself, okay, well, let's just stay in town, and we'll go look around and look at shoes or go shopping or something. I ended up going window shopping. I didn't buy anything, but it was just nice to spend some time away. And so what I ended up doing is I bought a notebook and some of those really nice fine tipped pens. And that's the way I like to write. Everyone has their favorite type of pen, and that's how I go. And I drove to a local park, and I just started writing. And I started writing about the OSHA thing that'll end up going on Substack, and I'll narrate it. But that's what I noticed, is that's what I used to start doing when I first started the channel over a year ago. Was I would write all of my scripts and then transcribe them onto the computer. And I think that is a lot of the things that made me more productive in getting my thoughts out. Because like a live stream, right? It's all extemporaneous. It's all off the cuff. It's all very impromptu. And you are articulating your thoughts in real time, which is something I really, really enjoy. Versus that of writing something out and inciting things and whatnot, which I don't mind doing. That was a big chunk of my undergraduate life, was working in law, so you had to do research all the time, right? But I've learned that it's a lot easier to self-edit and really get your thought out when you sit there and think, when you have a piece of pen and paper in your hand. Maybe that just makes me more of a Luddite. I don't know, but I think that's my key to success of being more productive and getting the scripted work out. So definitely something to keep in mind. And so the idea of more narratives and then actually writing them down, having a pen to paper record, I think is very good. And then the third thing that sort of came to my mind is I was listening to a podcast that the Distributist was on, called The Beautiful Toilet, which is the weirdest name for a podcast. No insult to the guy. It was a really good 2-hour conversation, but strange name. And they were getting to the subject of like the trans question, and they were talking about how it's very much religious, and all of that stuff, which is it made me think of Schmidt, and it made me think of political theology, which of course is interesting, and it sort of made me think. And this is where I'm thinking out loud, and by all means, I want to hear your feedback. But I was thinking about how it's so religious, and it's this perceived harm that if I don't recognize the situation of their identity, or if I don't use the right word, or if I don't say, oh, I'm not a biologist, right? I can't really give you an adequate definition of what a woman or a man is, then it's sacrilege. It would be like someone going today, right, with a veneration of the cross and trying to smash it and light it on fire. And that's their equivalent. And I just couldn't help but think to myself that, maybe there's always that idea of oh, the right always defends what the left was doing 10, 15 years ago. And I couldn't help but think to myself, I wonder how true that might be in relation to these questions, because we're talking about, um, political parts of our lives that are very much a religion, or at least we talk about the left like they're engaging in this new civic religion, whether it's the civil rights movement and all that, as Caldwell had put out, or now more recently, this whole issue with of course, the trans question. And because it's religious, and what we're seeing in reaction from sort of the normie con right, or sort of your prescriptive mainstream media, your Daily Wire GOP types, is that they're just trying to logically argue why they're wrong, or what makes a man and what makes a woman. And I just thought to myself, it's kind of interesting that there's this sort of inversion where there's this religious faith-based argument now coming out of the left, and then now on the right, we're seeing sort of this rationalism, this argumentation of down lines of logic, where even in like 2015, 2016, you could be a popular right wing content creator providing responses in a logical sense to like feminism, at post Gamergate and whatnot. And I thought that was something particularly interesting, that maybe we've now found ourselves in the inverse, where in the West, a lot of the right is now these rationalists, whereas now the spiritual is on the side of the left with this new religion. And it's something that is interesting because, we always talk about all the terms left and right, I think, are rather meaningless because they have come from the French Revolution based upon seeding. And we've talked about that really it's a difference between good and evil. It's a difference between right and wrong, order versus disorder, nomian versus antinomian. And I kind of think that those definitions are more preferable because it's just something that's applicable in essence, is that I think that the divorce from the spiritual in the West has definitely had an impact, which is why I think now there's been this great return in the last maybe 30 or 40 years or so, where people are looking towards the New Age, where people are looking towards older types of faiths and religions, or are looking towards the Orient. And I think that plays a very large role in that instance. And even though we said facts don't care about your feelings, as Ben Shapiro would famously meme himself, they don't care about feelings because your gut feeling is then based on faith. I think even various other thinkers had sort of said that about their own religion and their own faith at the time. So that was something that had been on my mind, this sort of inverse between the rational, old school left not Peter, Christopher Hitchens, atheist types debating with religious figures of the early 2000s, to where now it's the right wing defending rationalizations, rationalism, and thinking over the gut feeling of I affirm, I identify as, which I just find very strange, especially as someone who is coming back to religion and is beginning the process of joining the church, which is something that quite a few people have been asking now. I'm going to go catch up on questions. Monothalmo says that OSHA sounds like a well, I'm sure someone has probably named their kid that. But Tuesday says, why would anyone do drugs when you can just mow a lawn? Well, if it was good for Hank Hill, it's probably good for you. So if you have a lawn, go mow it. But there are quite a few good questions in here, actually. George Sagan asked, Prudentialist, I heard that you had mentioned that you're Orthodox. I had recently begun going to a Greek Orthodox church. How do you cope with Lent, and have you basically gone vegan? Well, I will admit to you that I have not gone fully vegan onto it because given my transplant and my conversation with the dietitian and my transplant doctor at the clinic, my Lent is slightly modified. I have to eat with my medication, so I have something with breakfast and dinner. And I'll try my best to adhere to that, so I'll skip lunch. I've given up microwavable foods. I've given up mainly most dairy products, and I gave up fast food. So things I actually have to cook when I want to eat something, unless it's been prepared for me. So I try my best to do so, and I try my best to, be more engaged with the faith in the prayers. I go to Vespers. I went to Annunciation. I went to my friend's recent Chrismation. It's been a fun challenge, and I had a very lengthy conversation with my priest today about some of the things that are going on. So as I continue this journey, and I'll probably talk about it more in depth, maybe in a video or something about this path and this journey, because it means a lot to me and it weighs heavily on me, just because one of the things that really bothers me, I guess, and this is my own insecurity, and this is something I somewhat talked about today, is that, sort of my big comeback to religion and my comeback to faith was, over the course of the last 2 years, right? You had the transplant, the kidney failure, the year of dialysis, the post-operation infections that almost killed me. I've been very closely acquainted with death now, quite a few times. And I don't recommend that anyone ever go through this at all. I really don't want you to ever experience that. And I pray to God that you never do. But, when this all first started, my sort of told myself, I should probably get right with my creator in case things go to, hell in a handbasket. Things go south, which was always this weird clash, because I would have that thought on one hand, but then on the other, I had that, early to mid 20s youthful sense of invincibility. When it first started, I recall very distinctly calling my best friend, and I said, "Oh, well, there's some restrictions I have to take. I have to take a phosphorus binder. I can't drink as much as I used to, and I have to, restrict some things in my diet." I said, "Probably when I come out of this with the transplant, I'll be as healthier than I've ever been." Which to some extent is true, although I did gain quite a bit of weight afterwards, because, I can finally eat all the things that I missed eating, like, pizza or ice cream and things like that. And I, even now, when I caught COVID in December, I was like, well, get a treatment. We'll be fine. I'm not too worried. Despite the fact I'm an immunosuppressed person, even the flu, I'm much more likely to die of now than anything. And that weighs on me, because I still act like that sometimes, although I'm very acquainted with death. But, as a lot of prayer and a lot of chanting will tell you, that, I do tremble before judgment, and I should be concerned, because I am a wretch, and I've certainly lived a life of one, as you've seen in some of my Substack posts where I wrote about being chaste, because clearly I wasn't, and I'm not. And yeah, those are the things that weigh on me in that instance. So it's something I'll probably talk about in the future, but that's something that weighs between me. Like, is this being performative because I want to make good, or am I being genuine? And I like to think that I am. I do shed tears every time I go on Saturdays and Sundays and various other services. It's just something that weighs on you as you're trying to make sense of everything that you are and everything that you've done. So that's a bit of my story there. There's my cup of coffee, you can see. So Ryan Young asks, do you go through immunosuppression for all of your life? Yes. So, for an example, that's just from the other week when I refilled. But yeah, I take it every 12 hours, a series of medications, from blood thinners to immunosuppressive drugs to blood pressure medication and some steroids. So every 12 hours is what I do. That's the price I pay for a normal life, and having my friend with me, so to speak, my passenger, as I like to call him sometimes. But yeah, it's these are the things that do weigh on me, and those are the things that keep on my mind. But yeah, I'm immunosuppressed for as long as I have this organ inside of me, which I didn't know when I first was being walked through how the surgery would work. They don't remove the old ones. They just keep them in there. They're still attached. They still get blood and whatnot. And I couldn't help but chuckle at that. I was like, oh, I really wanted to have one of them taken out so I could, have it in my, in like a jar, this deformed, ugly kidney and whatnot. And, have it on my mantle is sort of just like, this is what I persevered through. I know that sounds very morbid. And I'm kind of glad that isn't the case, because I just saw an awful video of someone who had gotten a hysterectomy and they jarred their uterus. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm never going to have that thought ever in my mind again. I don't ever want to do that. But yeah. Sam Gutierrez asks, how do more people on the right wake up to the reality of what the intellectual dark web types really are? Does the right need them, and what does the future hold without them? Well, Sam, I did a video about a year ago now talking about James Lindsay, of all people, because he had attacked Alex Kashuta, and I wanted to just highlight some of the drama here. That I think that, I mean, they're old school liberals. They're the type, excuse me, they're the type of liberal that's just like, oh, things have gone too far to the left, or they don't like a specific brand of identity politics, or they just don't like how culminating this new civic religion is, which that's what it is. And many people buy into it because it's like, oh, well, they also oppose it too, therefore they must be our friend. But then when you actually, hold out and you show off a right-wing opinion, they immediately always police to the right. And James Lindsay is probably the best example of this in today. Because, I mean, Sam Harris, this IDW type, went totally unhinged. And so the comparison I've made, and the comparison that someone like Pedro Gonzalez has made, is that they're like, the Girondins of the French Revolution. They were on board with the revolution in a more neoconservative type. They were far more militaristic, which I think a lot of these sort of, IDW sort of neoconservatives are. And they got executed by the French, by the Jacobites, or by the Jacobins, excuse me. And I think that the same thing will happen to them. Eventually, they will be canceled, because you're eventually going to run out of all of these sort of pieties and sacraments that you can adhere to on the left before either you completely sell your soul or you put your foot down and you get canceled. What does the future hold without them? I think, well, if we had, I think what would be better is that if we could just identify that people like Sam Harris or James Lindsay or Karlin Boroshenko or whatever, they can get all the cushy deals at PragerU that they want, because as PragerU has already tweeted out about a year and a half ago now, that, there is no conservatism. It just defends liberalism, and that's it. We already know what the logical conclusions of the liberal project is. We're living in it. So I think how you get to have a future without them is to straight up just attack them. And force them to pick a side, because clearly they're not right. They're not rightists. So force them into that camp that they hate to be in. Either you're with us or against us. So sort of like a based draft, as Spandrel would say. And I think that would be the way to have a future without them. That way you're not having all of these middling types policing the right wing, when we could be moving in a much better direction. So yeah. Yeah, I agree, Charlemagne. And in fact, with all of his swords, we could challenge him to a real duel. So other questions. Let's take a look. And Mr. John D is in the chat. I always love Mr. John D. He's great. So here we go. The other question I think that was asked was from Hunger, who's a great supporter, and I got to meet him at the event. Great guy. If you could restart your channel without the international relations focus, what would you do? I think I would probably then use my other degree, which was on American history, because one of the things that I studied on and what my bachelor's thesis was about the American Constitutional Convention and what founders' intent really means. What were the thoughts and the notes that James Madison and others wrote during that time, and the application of constitutionalism in the United States, which I think would contrast, interestingly, because I'm now reading through Imperium Press's collected works of Joseph de Maistre, and he's sort of criticizing constitutionalism. So I would probably focus a lot in that aspect of the ups and downs of constitutionalism, and probably a lot more political theory, because I don't do a lot of that. There are much better channels that do, but I would probably try and mingle my way in there. I do have a lot of American and Texas-based history that I don't talk about. And I think that if I didn't have the IR focus, I would probably do a lot more of the storytelling type videos and a lot more unscripted work, I think, because, I'm not enjoying the... I'm not enjoying sort of rank punditry. I try my best to avoid it. I've done it maybe once or twice on the channel where I talk about drama like the TPUSA thing, but I think it'd be a lot more Americana history focus if I didn't do IR. Um, so yeah, that's something for sure that I would be doing if I didn't do the international relations stuff. Um, Big brain content. I already love the name. Have I read On War by Clausewitz? Yes, I have, and I would recommend that everyone read Clausewitz. It's just, I think, required reading and sort of the Western strategic and military canon. So yeah, let's see here. What scent is the candle? If I recall correctly, it is a mulberry sort of mix of apple kind of. No, it's just mulberry. It's just a mulberry candle. So yeah, that's what it is, Mr. D. Let's see here. John Sun. Why do you think so many people on the right are in the West supporting Vladimir Putin? How do they think it will help you? It seems strange to do so without sort of understanding the Soviet and post-Soviet reality. I think that it has a lot to do with maybe a knee-jerk reaction that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Like, oh, they're fighting the gay, so ergo I must support. And I don't think that we can ever reduce politics to that kind of binary, because I think it reduces things to just. I mean, yes, things do get reduced to the friend enemy distinction, but I think that it's also very reductive when we're not looking at history. We're not looking at state agency. We're not looking at the people in Ukraine and whatnot, and their unfortunate tragedy of wanting to defend your homeland while also having essentially a puppet government, right? That's running things, and it's probably not even in the country. So I have of course held the position to stay neutral in this conflict. I'm not covering the day by day events of the war. I'm covering the second order effects, because I think that is the best way to really analyze what is going on and what the end result might be. So I can't tell you about how the war is going, because I don't want to report on something that might be debunked or shown off as digital propaganda later. So I think that us looking at it as Westerners, because I don't live in that country and I can't really tell you what's going on unless I talk to people that live there, that I think that it's best to abstain and have neutrality on the issue, rather than to be just so knee-jerk reaction, enemy of my enemy is my friend. So there are plenty of other good questions here. Tuesday asks, how do you set about meeting young women who could be near future wife material, asking for a friend who is me? Well, Tuesday, I'm probably not the best person to give you that advice. I haven't really put myself out there since the transplant, or since recovering from COVID. I did go on a date not too long ago that someone had set up. I've gone on two, actually, that have been sort of people recommending that I meet with them. One of them was this lovely young girl from, not from church, but her parents go to the church, but she's in school and she wanted to focus on it. But there's a 6-year age gap. She was 20 and I was 20, I'm 26. And so just different experiences in life. I guess it didn't really work out. And then the second one, and I told the story in private in the Telegram chat with Morgoth and a few others. I got set up with a woman with who's from the across the pond. Her parents came over to the United States to work and to buy land, but I can tell that she's from the north because her accent, I swear, is basically like it's female Morgoth. And I'm having this coffee with her, and I'm trying my best not to grin or smirk like an idiot and trying to be respectful and listening to what she has to say. But I just can't help but think to myself, oh my goodness, this woman sounds pound for pound like Morgoth, except just this attractive woman across the coffee table. And I'm just like, oh no. I'm going to automatically associate her with, oh, well, hello there, folks, that sort of thing. I'm just like, I couldn't do it. And I just thanked her for her time. But I think that, of course, I think online dating can be kind of fruitless. It's not really worth the time. While at the same time, I think just knowing people and actually meeting people in the real world, this is where I say having the confidence of being a good public speaker matters a lot, because as those of you who met me at the event, I'm like 5'10". I'm incredibly skinny. I'm not the world's best looking person, but I've gotten around. I can admit that. And I think having the confidence to just walk up and talk to somebody and get to know them, or to make an advance appropriately, of course, goes a long way. So that's really what it takes, is getting to know someone. And of course, above all, making sure that she shares your values or is open to them so you can get her into your direction. So yeah. Finishing this coffee before it gets terribly cold. Oh, great. This was a conversation that I'm that you're asking me that I also need to go message Frody from Guide to Culture about. What Tarkovsky movie do I want to dig into? I want to dig into the Sacrifice. I think it's probably one of my all-time favorite. I mean, all of his movies are amazing works of art, but I do want to definitely say that I will be covering The Sacrifice. So there are 3 films that I want to recover besides Man of God, which I've recently seen. You'll probably get that this week is my review. So 4 movies, actually. So The Sacrifice, Sergeant York, 1941, and Her, 2013. And then, of course, this week, hopefully, you will get my full review of Man of God, the 2021 film about St. Nectarios, which I didn't know much about him. In prep for the movie, I watched Trisignon Films' little 40-minute documentary about his life. And then I watched the film, and it was basically like, oh, they got everything right based on what we know of his life. So it was a really, really good film, and you'll get my review of that very soon. So let's see here. I remember, this is from Vingul. I like Vingul. He's in a lot of our similar circles. I've seen him a lot with Mr. Walrus, who's got a great channel that I've recommended in the past. I remember the last time that Prude was on the AA stream, he had joined just as they finished the obligatory half-hour introductory nonsense. Well, I wasn't expecting to be on the last time I was on UO. I had wrote my article on responding to Francis Fukuyama because I typically can't make it unless I'm working from home or something, or the power goes out or whatever at work. That's some crazy thing where they get me sent home because of the weather. But I forgot, there's that, because of daylight savings, I could actually show up because it starts an hour later. And I got home and there I was. So yeah, like I had mentioned in the comments of that stream, I wasn't expecting to come on. So yeah. But there were a few super chats that I had missed or that had came along. Seasider, you sent $10 US. Thank you so much. And as I've mentioned, as always, a lot of this money goes to paying for the StreamYards, but most importantly, keeping my anti-rejection medication cheap and helping me pay off medical bills. So you guys are fantastic. But yeah, there's plenty of stuff going on that I would love to. Aaron B. Aaron Gwyn. Hey, TP. That's weird. Just call me Prude or Matt. Doesn't matter. Have you fasted from dopamine or the internet? If so, do you have any advice? I'm frustrated with my life choices and I want to change. So this came up in discussion at the event, and this is something that I try my best to practice, although I'm terrible at it. But something actually that the Orthodox Jews do is they have a day where they totally are disconnected from everything, right? Like basically like no appliances or whatnot. And I think that I've started to do that. So usually on Sundays, I don't have my phone on me when I'm at church. I leave it in my car and I'll just make announcements, but I don't really engage. And then after the streams on Sunday, I just leave my phone off completely. I don't touch it. I just leave it charging or plugged in or whatever, and I don't mess with it. I try and live a very scheduled life because I do work a full, boring 9 to 5. I do this. I'm active in the church. And so having dedicated time off or days off matters a lot. So if you can discipline yourself into scheduling time away from the phone, it helps a lot, and being away from electronic devices. So for instance, I don't have a Kindle. I don't have an ebook or reader or anything like that. And so every book that I buy is a paper copy, usually hard, cover, and I will read. And I will schedule time to read and to write and to not think about the research that I need to do because I need to be disconnected from the world. The only occasional time I ever pick up my phone is when somebody calls me. And I think having actual conversations rather than be tweeting or being on your phone and texting 24/7 helps a lot, and it grounds you because, for instance, I talk to Paul Fahrenheit on the phone almost daily. He's become a very good friend of mine. And I think that's something that we always want to do is to humanize ourselves and have actual real world conversation. Because if we're entirely online, like I said at the event, and like I've said in that real talk, we become deracinated, and it becomes very easy to fall into the, rabbit hole of schizo posting and doom scrolling and not doing anything productive. So taking time off is really what matters. And if you can do that, then you're already far more disciplined than the average person who's addicted to the internet. But fasting fully from the internet is something that I'm actually going to do during next year's Lent. I'm going to give up Twitter for Lent. So 40 days of no tweeting. So that's the plan. But yeah, I mean, just talk to people, and people are going through and talking away from about the Morgoth stuff. I'm so far behind now in the chat. Oh goodness, but yes, yes, the woman almost sounded word for word like Morgoth. I'm so glad everyone's having fun with it. Um, Yeeter Skeeter. I'm already loving these names. Came a little late, but glad to see the stream today. Ever since I found out about you, it's been a real pleasure watching these streams. Thanks, mate. Well, I'm very thankful. And I noticed that they are Canadian $5. So, Mr. Skeeter, I will be praying for you because you do live in Canada. So, yeah. Oh, and Jay Inns is saying this is if I still have a Twitter account next year. Yeah, that's very true. But eventually it'll just be my profile picture with the Kermit von Metternich with an eye patch on, asking to help find my friends because we all come back to it. George Sagan again asks, do I share AA's views on the anime question? Well, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I've seen a few anime. I've watched Cowboy Bebop. I've watched Angel's Egg. I watched, I think, the 1997 version of Berserk, which covered the Golden Age arc, and I've read through most of Berserk. So I think that the problem is that what gets to be called art or what considers to be like really good story writing, unfortunately, gets thrown out with the bathwater because there's far more degeneracy than there is actual good storytelling. So I do share his position that yeah, it's bad, and those are like maybe the four things I've ever seen. So Cowboy Bebop, Angel's Egg, and reading a little bit of Berserk and watching the 1997 version. But other than that, nothing, and I don't intend to. And somebody had made a joke in the Telegram chat saying what was right wing or whatnot, but I don't care. I don't. Nothing is going to make me ever want to sit down and watch Legends of the Galactic Heroes or whatever. It's not my cup of tea. If I'm going to go watch a film, I'm going to watch something foreign and obscure because I want to be that kind of hack. But yeah, it's not. I definitely sympathize with AA's position almost 100%. But yeah, let's take a look. Oh, someone's now asking if I read what did I think? I think after the Conviction arc, it kind of becomes less dark, gritty horror and more sort of like a JRPG fantasy. But you know, what can I say? What MBTI type are you? I've never actually. What is that? The Myers Briggs personality test or whatever. I don't think I've taken it in forever, so don't know. I couldn't tell you. I don't know what my is. I might have to actually go take that test and find out. And hipster trash. Yes, I am. I am hipster trash. I have no problem admitting that. I can definitely be hipster trash. When are you watching Kurosawa then? I think I've only seen one Kurosawa film, but I want to see more. So soonish. Heck, I might put a Kurosawa film on the list I need to send to Frody. Eater Skeeter again for $5 Canadian. Yeah, Canada has been sucking a lot recently. My parents immigrated here from Poland in the 90s, and they've ended up hating it here. $6.80 a gallon. I'm assuming you mean $6.80 Canadian a gallon, which is almost double here in the United States. My prayers are out to you. But yeah. Michael Nocter asks, have I seen Parasite 2019? No, I have not. I know it won an Oscar and whatnot, but I really haven't paid attention to a lot of like modern films, to be perfectly honest with you. I mentioned this about a year or so ago in this thread I wrote up, but the last really nice modern film that I can enjoy, or that I did really enjoy, was La La Land. And it's not a good film. I mean, it is, but it isn't, because it feels like a ghost dance to an older era of Hollywood. It's two white main characters. It's based in Los Angeles. It's about the entertainment industry, and it's about this idea of, film and this tribute to the classic musical era of the past, a golden age of Hollywood that is no really longer in existence. Because the last musical that came out was a new rendition of West Side Story with an entirely brown cast that was all about sort of focusing more on the identitarian issues than it was the original. I like it because it's of what was, and I liked it a lot, but at the same time, they're not as talented of singers and actors. They have great chemistry because these two actors have worked so closely together in previous films. That was like the last thing I really enjoyed because it spoke to this older culture and this older form of entertainment that's not there anymore. And of course it notoriously gets snubbed at the Oscars, right? For what was it, Moonlight, right? The wonderful gay black drama or whatever that was just pure Oscar bait. And just, it was sort of like the death of Hollywood, that this was it. Like, oh, it's over, right? Like the last vestiges of Hollywood culture, the golden era of Hollywood died. And I think that's why I've really not been particularly enjoying anything. And now they're going after like the Nordic, culture. Netflix has decided to just screw the Vikings and everything like that with their TV show. I know that they have the Northman, right? That's coming out soon. There's some concerns about that, despite the fact it looks very good. So that it devours all. You are not immune. So there was an interesting question from Coastal Reaction. What are my favorite Disney movies? In terms of like production quality or just in general, I mean, that's a good question. That's not something I particularly think about, to be perfectly honest with you. Like, post 60s Disney had a lot of live action stuff in like the 70s that I don't think were particularly bad. But I mean, Roy Disney really brought the animation renaissance to Disney before he died, and that's why now everything is sort of crap. But I mean, I think and maybe it's just a product of how old I am. Like I said, I'm 26. Like maybe it's the golden age of Disney animation, that Disney animation renaissance that I really enjoy. So I guess Aladdin would be one of my favorites, which is so interesting because you get that weird. It's like a trilogy of films now, but you get the second one, right? Return of Jafar, where they brought I think it's the gentleman who voices Homer Simpson to go play Genie because Robin Williams was like, F that. I didn't want me to be the big selling point for the film, but that's what they did. And then, of course, I think he comes back for the third one, King of Thieves. So I guess that would be my favorite from growing up. So let's see here. Tuesday, FA Tuesday. For $5 US says, do send the Geordie girl down to San Antonio. I can't find any Anglo girls here. Well, if that's the case, then you might want to also have a same struggle with Oros Post, because he's also in the more southern parts of Texas, and I'm sure he can relate to your feelings. So yeah. But maybe when she's done with school, she'll go down to San Antonio. What can I tell you? Plenty of questions here. Lots of good stuff now. Yes, Disney is satanic evil. Well, I mean, modern stuff is satanic evil. I mean, even I think with Walt still in charge. This is the other thing, D, that really irks me. And I'm not saying what modern Disney is evil, because it absolutely is. We all kind of know how that Turning Red BS from Pixar Disney Studios came out, and that's just basically go whore yourself out, young girls, which is a terrible message. But they sell it as a coming of age. So prostitution is now a coming of age experience for young women, which is just demonic. But no, Walt Disney, testified at the House Un-American Activities Committee against communists like George Sorel. And actually, one of the best pieces of content that Razorfist has ever put out was talking about how Hollywood has always been communist. And that during the time of the Cold War, the Soviet Union spent millions of dollars per year to influence Hollywood and to be, putting out socialist and communist messages. And Walt Disney, of course, because he stands out against this, he speaks out against it. What do we remember him for? We remember him because Family Guy says that, oh, this guy is an anti-Semite that froze himself and will return one day when that question has been addressed. Despite the fact that he loved his country, he helped produce war propaganda films for the United States. I mean, he was, in all essence, a patriot, regardless of your thoughts of the Second World War. And he hated communism. Like, I can't... And so he dies in 1967, right? I don't remember what his last movie he personally worked on was, but it sucks that that's kind of what happened, right? Just terrible. But yeah. Glow in the dark. Wait, well, yeah, that's what it was. So, okay, there are two things glow in the dark about this Turning Red film that I think come out. Was basically one, My Panda, My Choice, which is kind of clear, and then literally, in order to go see a boy band that they like, when she transforms into a panda, she sells pictures of herself to other people inside, like a girls' restroom at their school, and they're like growing up. So yeah, terrible, 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 terrible stuff. King of Games points out that the last good film he saw was Ford versus Ferrari. Actually, yeah, that was a fantastic film. So yeah, no, I really like that one too. A fantastic movie, and I'm not even a car or racing guy, but just it's a very good movie. Very, very good movie. So things like that to keep in mind is that we're sort of watching the culture change and things like that. But here's another question. Uh, from American Populist, he says that a Polish general had said that they should take Kaliningrad, which would mean World War III. How likely is that to happen with insane children in charge? While there's a lot of discussion about Kaliningrad and making it Koenigsberg again, right, to make it German, keep in mind that the Poles are a little more, I think, open about their sort of anti-Russian bias. And thankfully, I think they're in NATO. I think to keep them in reign. A lot of people have talked about bringing it back to Germany, but I don't think that that's going to be something that is likely to happen. So I mean, that not to mention it's also completely surrounded right by NATO nations from the north and the south. So hopefully that isn't going to be the case. The fact that they're being so unhinged and reckless in this kind of rhetoric is also a really mask off moment, because if I recall, Biden had just said the other day that, oh, Putin must go. And then the White House had to immediately send out like a clarification to the press about what that means. But I mean, in these sort of dementia moments, we kind of get to hear the truth. So it's sort of a nice formalization of, what kind of crazy BS we're dealing with. Yeah. So plenty of things to discuss there, I think. But all more people coming in saying hello. All my favorite people. Mongoose Man had said, I really liked your recent video. Well, thank you. I like doing Substack narrations. I like to think that the things I write that aren't made with videos in mind, where you have to put up images or intros or music or whatever, I think it's a lot better to just do audio work, which is why I think one of my more favorite pieces of content I've put out recently was the Fallout New Vegas discussion with Paul Fahrenheit and Kid Ace. Like, that was, I got to talk about like a video game for almost 2 hours and about the politics of it and why that piece of media is still relevant now 12 years later from when it came out in 2010. So I do enjoy when I get to narrate or just be off the cuff, because I do think that I'm far more better articulating than I am writing things down, especially when I'm typing, because I feel like I have to work within these constraints. I type things with like the whole legal justified system rather than how the headings are set up. And it's always a drain to get me to write and type something out, which is why I do a lot of speech to text. That way I can just edit out my thoughts, and when I'm done talking, and then I can put the piece out. So something that I like to do for sure. So plenty of interesting other questions. Favorite video games. Okay, I will give you 5 right off the bat, because this is pretty easy. Age of Empires 2. And this is in no particular order. Age of Empires 2, Halo Combat Evolved, System Shock 2. Let me go make sure that my fingers are on screen. And the other 2 I would probably definitely say would be Morrowind, and then Homeworld, the Homeworld series. I really like those games. So I'm into RTS, management, 4X, and then, of course, first-person shooters. The Halo trilogy is Kino. I don't care what anyone says. It's fantastic. So, yeah. Those are my 5 for sure. But yeah, Charlemagne says it best. Your country is in a bad state when the truth is only spoken by accident by a senile old man who is president that they illegitimately got in. It's very true. And Charlemagne has been on fire lately with his Substack. So if you're not giving Charlemagne $5 a month to go actually support all of the fantastic work that he's done, you should do so. Teddy Boy says, do I follow Jay Dyer? I occasionally see clips of him. I think that he's very knowledgeable, but he's also kind of a debate bro type, which is not my particular cup of tea. And I think that if you're really interested in knowing more about orthodoxy, then I would always just recommend what the church recommends, which is come and see. And that's, I think, really sort of the better way to do it. But I occasionally see a clip of him, but I don't follow him, or I'm very close in his circle. I like I said, I'm not a fan of interdenominational, fighting or conflict. I have it explicitly banned in my Telegram chat, because I've got Hindus in there, pagans, various forms of Christianity and other faiths. So I just like it when people get along. And pardon me if that means I'm engaging in a bit of ecumenism, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. Let's see here. Hunger the Dire Merchant for $2. Thank you so much. American Psycho patron stream win. Well, that can be a movie night. So a nice benefit of being a subscriber on Subscribestar and supporting me is that we have movie nights. So all of the films that I just listed to review are all films except Man of God. Are all films that we watched together. So my patrons had suffered through when we watched movies like Her for all the 2 hours that it was and things like that. So American Psycho, sure, we can do that next. That's perfect. That sounds great. We can definitely do that. I'm all for it. So yeah. Peter asks, when did I discover it? Orthodoxy in that question. So I had discovered it kind of by happenstance, actually. I was in the hospital, and due to COVID restrictions, my parents weren't there. And I had asked for a chaplain. I guess I wanted to talk to somebody, and lo and behold, it was an Orthodox priest. And that's kind of the way I discovered it. And at the time, I was recovering from this post-op infection. And it gave me a lot to think about. I didn't really think about it much. And then later afterwards, especially while I was still on dialysis, but I was doing it at home, I started reading about it, a little bit of church history, a little bit of how the churches in the East had evolved from Paul's missions and the teachings of it. And I had bought books more on the history as well as some of the writings of the church fathers. So I have the 4-volume edition that you can find on Amazon of the Philokalia, that I'm still reading through because there's so much to take in. But I don't think that it, and I started really attending seriously post-transplant. So over the course of the last 9.5 months now. And that's sort of my story to it. And the most moving moment of my life really was when you walk in through those doors, even as a visitor and an inquirer, and hearing the divine liturgy for the first time. And to enjoy now in habit, although it's now the liturgy of St. Basil the Great because we're in Lent, but it's the same joy, the same prayer of thy kingdom come every time. And, and like I mentioned earlier today on the stream, like if you're interested, every church website, whether it's Antiochian, Russian, or Greek, or the American Orthodox Church, which is the parish I attend, come and see. And that's all I can really recommend there. So those are my thoughts there. Let's take a look here. Everyone now is referencing. Everyone's referencing now the Paul Allen and all sorts of stuff on whether or not that sort of stuff. Vingel, if you just look up the Prudentialist on Telegram, you'll go to the comment section or you'll see the chat, and it's just Prudentialist chat, and you can find it there. All sorts of things happen in that conversation. I think there's a gentleman asking through walkthroughs on Fallout New Vegas right now as we speak. Minoan says, I've never joined movie night. Well, I recommend that you do, because it's one of the benefits that you get besides seeing videos early and getting to see other cool content exclusively for y'all. So I would recommend that you do. It's a lot of fun because we'll all pause the film and we'll all just laugh or talk shit about the movie. So that's a great time. But yeah, let's see Paul Allen's stream. And I noticed that earlier. I think that someone had tweeted it out. I think it was Morgoth, or he put it on Telegram, that like the Zoomer aspect of like cultural identity is that people identify with Patrick Bateman through the memes, not the, like the Sigma male grind set or whatever, and not the fact that he's a psychopathic murderer, right? Like it's you'll see all of those video memes of the part where him and Willem Dafoe are in the bar just chatting and nodding along, and not the fact that, just chatting with based friends or whatever. And it's just like, this guy is gonna kill someone with like a hooker with a chainsaw later, right? Well, this stream's not being monetized, but yeah. Definitely things to keep in mind. King of Games asks, Total War versus Medieval 2 Total War. Well, I've not played Medieval 2, so I can really only say Rome Total War because that's the only one I've played. Although I'm going to be, speaking of strategy games and whatnot, Cyberpunk Internal Affairs did a wonderful stream intro for me that I'm going to be using in future Sunday streams. It's sort of based off of the Age of Empires 2 theme, the great game and all that, because I do focus on the realist side of things. So I'll be trying to put that video edited together, and my patrons, you guys, will be the alpha beta testing, the A/B testing. If you guys like it, then we're going to go forward with it and try it out on a stream. So plenty of stuff to talk about in the future, at least for those who have been a great supporter and a great help to me and whatnot. Sorry to ask, says MG, but have you played Hearts of Iron 4? It was gifted to me by a friend at Christmas time and with some of the DLC installed, but I have not actually opened up the game and I've not played it once. I know it's incredibly addicting, and I know that games like Hearts of Iron 4 and Euro Universalis have ruined Zoomer geopolitical analysis, but I've never played it. Although it's sitting in my Steam library account right now to do that, which is, again, another thing that we do with my patrons, is that if you have a Steam account and you want to play a game, we'll go through our libraries and see what we've got, and we'll go play together. So I've played more Halo with my patrons than I have anything else in recent memory. People are telling me now it's very addicting and that it's the real alt-right pipeline is Hearts of Iron 4 getting Germany with Julius Evola as its leader to go win the Second World War. Paramount asking, the Paramount Halo series. No, I have not. I've only seen screen images, but I'm not interested at all because there are plenty of articles that are saying they didn't take anything from the source material, so I don't give two shits. I'm not watching it. Sorry, guys. I'm not reviewing it either. Maybe Argent or someone else who does more media review commentary can give it a chance or something like that. But I think as we move, I think a little bit from questions, there was something that I thought was, I'm now thinking about it because we've had conversations on the spiritual in here, is the discussion over, are all, this Enlightenment rational tradition that sort of is now on the right, where everything is done sort of rationalistically, legalistically, to argue against what we're seeing out of this affirmative, faith-based left. And it just makes me think, the abandonment of the spiritual, because, I think Morgoth, who is not a Christian, or is not a practicing one, he had said a while back that only a God can save us. And, for me, to a certain extent, I kind of agree with that. We are fighting against forces of evil. And, for those of you of that faith, right, we are up against the evil one. We are assaulted every day by images of, what it can only be described as demonic, described as satanic. And, Christian moms from the 1970s and 80s, right, most vindicated there. They're definitely owed an apology, because that slippery slope BS, right, is BS, because it's true. And I had mentioned earlier, I think it's one of the first videos I did was really on the slippery slope, that, they were debating in Griswold v. Connecticut about a married couple's invented right to privacy over the right to use birth control. And one of the justices that had dissented had said that at one point in time in the future, this logic could be used on abortion. And lo and behold, in Roe v. Wade, arguments around the right to privacy and birth control were used to go, to legalize abortion in the United States. And that is exactly why I'm like, the slippery slope is real. It's the unequivocal victor of the 21st century, as someone in the chat just put it. And lo and behold, that's where we're at. And, there are other forces at work, sure, in this world that are very material, that are very human actors. but we are dealing with those actors who are, I think, in my opinion, very much of evil. Um, and as B. Wrangler says here, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. I think flesh and blood are merely the mediums in which this evil works through. And I don't think you have to be Christian to recognize that we're dealing with something that I think is not just this over encompassing material evil of those that wish to starve or wish to buy farmland, while we're now going to be talking about very real food shortages all over the world. I There are far more other things. And I had mentioned this privately in a chat. It's something that I was reading through, and a lot of people were saying things about what's to come or what's to happen. And I had mentioned that, there's this reckless conversation about nuclear war. There's a reckless conversation about food shortages, climate refugees, things that all feel very deliberately planned. And there's talk now on the right, talk now on the left, talk now in the establishment classes of politics that, we seem to be in these twilight days of empire. And it just makes me think about all of the early church fathers, whether you're a Roman Catholic or within the Eastern faith, whether you're talking about the Roman Empire or the Byzantine Empire, that are witnessing all of these evils take place, all of these tragedies, and they're writing, and you can always get the sense that they're kind of waiting for the second coming. They're always waiting for Christ to return, and of course, no man knoweth the hour. But sometimes I can't help but feel like, and not to engage in heresy or anything, but I can't help but think many of us now, when we say that, uh, you know, we that we're up against the forces of evil, we're up against something demonic, we're up against something that is otherworldly. That wouldn't it be nice if someone could come and save us? Wouldn't it be nice if that could come, and that this struggle that we are now enduring can be found in some respite, or we can rejoice because he has come and returned. And I do feel like that sometimes our doom scrolling encourages that kind of defeatist behavior in something like that. And it's nice to hope that that'll come, but at the same time, no man knoweth the hour, and that we are human, and that again we must endure, whether you are Christian or whether you adhere to any other faith or you don't have faith. And I think that it is important for us to stay strong. And why, again, one of the things I've been advocating for, on both in real life as well as on this channel, when I talked about digital deracination, is that we cannot stay explicitly here in the ephemeral and in the digital. We can't. I encourage to do the basket weaving. I encourage local meetups. I encourage you to make friends that might be like-minded. I encourage you to do these things because it will help you endure, because the parasocial relationship cannot be the one fix all for everything. It never can, it never will be. As much as it's nice for you guys to post the frog emoji in the chat, or for someone to comment first on a popular video and things like that, I do worry that that is all that there is for some people, and that it's an escape for them. And I don't want that to be the case, because if we're going to espouse these views, if we're going to talk about navigating ruins or talk about rebuilding or surviving, this device of the internet may not be here forever, and it may not last in the way that we can communicate the way that we do. And we have to do something about that. I agree. So we have to be more human. We have to be more real. We have to be more incarnate, not digital. And I think that's why Luke Avery, Lambda, is such an inspiration to me, because this is a man who wears his faith on his sleeve and speaks out against what he thinks is evil, and he puts his face to it. And I think that that's brave. And I think that we all should be more like that. And I think that that's something that matters to us. Because if you can humanize yourself and recognize that you are real, you are flesh and blood, you are not some profile picture behind, an avatar. Although I love my frog Metternich one, but this is who I am as a human being. And I think that's what matters more than all the stuff that we do. Because if you can make friends and put yourself out there and be willing to engage and say, I am like you, I am your brother, and we are going to survive this mess together. We will work on the land, or we will work to keep this small town as a small town and no outsider developer comes in, then yeah, that's what's going to happen. And I think that matters a lot more in this instance. So yeah, I mean, things to keep in mind. And I'm now reading the chat as I've gone on this little rant. Apparently, Charlemagne has put his foot down about Mr. D living with him. I think that'd be the ultimate tease to Mr. D if he does come to the U.S. But yeah, I'm gonna let those two have it out in the chat there. But that was something that was on my mind throughout the last couple of days. And I think that we do need more storytellers. I think that Ernst is right that so many of us rely on the internet or rely on blogs and things like that to keep us going, which of course is great. But I think it helps to have something realistic in front of you. I'm now looking for like a book to just grab and hold. I have so many stacked. But it helps to have things that are, that are real and on paper that you can read and hold on to. One of the past projects I already have going on behind the scenes is that I'm trying to create external hard drives and PDFs of blogs and of content and of things that people have written, so that we have a library of our own work and things like that. Yes, this was The Southern History of the War by Edward Pollard, for those wondering. So yeah, that's something I'm also reading through, although I've been warned by others to read other history, but I find it interesting to have sort of a day-by-day recollection of the war. But yeah, it helps to have stuff like that. And someone's saying like, well, when are we going to print everyone's Substack backlogs? I think that's something that we should do. Because in the Dark Ages, or what is called the Dark Ages, which is always interesting about that sort of stuff, is that in the West and in the East, what is being preserved of these ancient philosophers and of ancient knowledge and tradition are monastics in the church, preserving this philosophy and this technology. If I recall correctly, Mendel, right, the guy with heritability and the pea plants or whatever, he worked for the church. So I'm very much angry about sort of the new age atheism or new atheism that still runs rampant now in the zeitgeist. But I mean, I think it will behoove us, all of us, to preserve that knowledge, because I think that how easy it is to take episodes away from TV shows on digital platforms requires you to go buy the physical copy. When books can be edited and they can say, oh, well, this guy was a racist, or, oh, we're not going to list this person's book on the Kindle store or whatever, it behooves you to go buy their book. And it behooves you to have all this. So plenty of things going on in there. And Mickey, if you just notice what's happening in this chat, you're just seeing John D and Charlemagne be John D in Charlemagne. But RCW points out that in truth is that you're a social influence now, and most of us are force multipliers. That's true. That's very true. I still don't like to view myself as that kind of person. I'm just a guy that espouses his opinions online. Although I'm aware that we're getting close to 6,000 and things like that. It's interesting that maybe a part of that is, that's true. I mean, and this is something I think that the left is actually right about. Of course, they always say it when you talk about spicy things, right? When you say that, oh, women are women and men are men, which is allegedly spicy now. But they tell you as a creator, you have a responsibility to, have a better impact or influence on your audience. And I think that, they're right, just not in the way that they want it to be. You are an influence if you create things, or if you have that following, you do have an influence and a responsibility to your audience. I want you to go outside. I want you to go out and touch grass. I want you to make friends, and I want you to be productive members of society. The important thing out of all of this is that, what is the best revenge? The best revenge is a life well lived. And that's what I want you to have. And that's what I want you to do. So Things to just keep in mind there. If that was a Destiny impression, I didn't know. Mr. D says, speaking of spicy, I'm listening to Prude while making habanero chili sauce. We'll do. Let me know how that goes. So yeah. Simple. Nikki, this is very simple. Define what a woman is. Apparently, it's a real issue nowadays. Because I'm not a biologist, as that judge had said. Simple. A man is someone who prepares himself for fatherhood, and a woman is someone who prepares themselves for motherhood. If you can't be a mother, then you're not a woman in that instance. That is not an insult to those who are barren or have fertility issues, but it's just a basis of how we are designed as human beings. A man is someone who can be a father, and a woman is someone who can be a mother. And that doesn't mean purely in the biological sense, but also in the maternal sense, to care for others. To me, that's the viewpoint I have. I mean, we can talk about XX and XY, but I don't care. It's simple. We have roles for the sexes, and that's how it goes. Simple as that. Cannot believe that that's the way that we have to go. And it tells you, I think, like Charlemagne had said about Biden, it tells you how far we have fallen. That what new atheists would have called religious ridiculousness or, religious ignorance of the science, when the science today is now become nothing more but its own proscriptive, and I mean that proscriptive, about what the truth actually is. And we're now engaging in these theological, Christian fan fictions that somehow, if you inject yourself with these hormones and you mutilate yourself, you can transfigure and transubstantiate yourself into something that you are inherently not. We are not. We're not that, and it's heretical, and because that's where we are now. And these are my frustrations and rants, maybe that come after Sunday, or these are the thoughts that I have when I drive back from liturgy and the post liturgical coffee hour and things like that. So, the truth is denied over feelings and a fear of cancellation. And I think this was something that Endeavor was talking about, because in the West, there are these foot soldiers that will go to your doors and protest you. And they'll go to places like gated communities, like where Tucker Carlson lives. So it's not like anyone is safe here, right? And that's what makes sense, and things like that. So it does have a role there, I think, for sure, that they have these foot soldiers. And in other places, they don't. So things to keep in mind there. But some other things that have been on my mind that I wanted to outline, and maybe this will be a future discussion, and I didn't elaborate too much on it when we talked about the down the capillaries piece that I had narrated, was just that one of the pleasures that you can really take from a road trip over flying, although I actually really like flying, I would love to get my pilot's license. I think there's a really interesting human thrill about being in the sky. But what is something that was on my mind when I do this weekly drive, and I of course I do it every Monday, which is a great way to start my Monday, or my work week, because the first half of the day, is not spent in the office, so I get to miss all of the weekly meetings and whatnot. But the nice thing about it, though, is that I am very much a rootless cosmopolitan. I was an Army brat. I've lived all over the U.S. I traveled all over the U.S. in college, and I lived overseas in Europe for almost a decade, and it grounds you. These small towns in the United States, and I imagine it's like that too with little villages and boroughs in the UK and in parts of Europe, they ground you to what the world once was, or they ground you to a world away from time, like I had mentioned. These are places where you still care for neighbors, you still care for one another, and it doesn't exist anymore. And when I lived in El Paso, when I was living with my girlfriend, my ex-girlfriend at the time, well, she was my girlfriend, now she's my ex. We moved into an apartment together not too far from the university. And she wanted to go out of her way and introduce herself to her neighbors. And I kind of explained to her that her neighbors right across from us in our apartment complex didn't speak the same language as her. And that it was going to be a little hard to cross that barrier, because she's not from Texas and she wasn't from the area. She was from out of state in a much more high trust, wider part of the country. And yeah, it was just a culture shock for them, or for her, excuse me. I was used to it. I've been living in El Paso for some time at that point. And it was just interesting because the smaller parts of the world remind you of what the culture once was. And it gives you a lot of love, I think, for Americana here in the US. And I think that this is something that matters, I think, for Americans especially, is that there are things to really keep in mind about what this country was and what it still has the possibility to be. And through localism, I think mainly, and through having your network of friends, your network of tens, that you will be able to to accomplish something. And this is why I don't do stuff with the face showing, because I'm going to laugh at the chat, because Charlemagne's just like, honey, the drugs are, or the neighbors are drug dealers. That's funny. El Paso is a shithole, no offense. The comparison I make to El Paso is taking a girl home when you're very, very drunk, because she's very pretty at night. If you go up to Scenic Drive and you look at the lights and you look at the city and you look at the mountain and the star on the mountain and you see the campus light up and you see across the border the lights and Ciudad Juarez and the mountains, it's very beautiful. And then you wake up and then it's daytime and then it's, you kind of regret your life choices. But, you know, as a white guy, it's also very, you know, easy to get away with things because, you know, people want you. But yes, it's definitely, it can be a shithole, but it does have its perks. The mountains, especially, it's the only place in Texas with a city on the mountains, which is very nice. But let's see here. Walk of shame, very much so for the city. But where did I live in Europe? Was someone had asked earlier. I lived in Germany. That was where I had lived, kind of like Sargon said, because his father was in the military and he went to Germany for a long time. So yeah. Oh, great. Now I've mentioned that and everyone's making fun of it. Yes, I know this is a well-documented thing with me. Did I fall in love with a few? Probably. Oh well, part of being young. But as I said in the Substack about being chaste, it's something that I'm not, but I certainly wish that I was, because I think Lambda is the best example of it all, being near 30 and being chaste and unmarried. I have a lot of sense of, not jealousy, but I'm very proud of him for it, living up to his values and words like that. So yeah. Rural living in our spheres is more of a cringe meme, to be honest. Urban life is the pinnacle of civilization and has been since Rome. Yes, there are benefits to living both rurally as well as urban. I'm not saying that, you know, it's rural living is cringe. I don't think so. I think a lot of people who go out to live rurally are not prepared for it. And they end up, and you see this with a lot of like van life types. They'll go buy acres of land and cows, and then they don't know how to manage it, and then they just give up and go back, which is partially, I think, why it's also a cringe meme. And there's also, of course, that really weird, like the Wojak, right, with the girl and sort of like the bohemian sundress, whatever, and everyone wants that, but they have no idea how much work goes into it. I see it all the time, which is why it requires you to really work and do it, whether it's beekeeping, taking care of cameras, you know, all sorts of stuff. All of that matters. Which, I mean, and Charlemagne, if you buy the event book, the Shieldings event book, Charlemagne has said it best about there are purposes of living in the urban life, the purposes of the, you know, the suburbs, although that's really deracinated now, as well as a rural life. And for some people, rural life is all they've ever known. But for me, as a rootless cosmopolitan up until recently, I find myself attached here, also in part because this is where sort of like the family calls home, or at least ancestrally. And so I grew up with some emotional and some memories of that. And that's why I have greater attachment to it than, say, my two brothers, right? And that's fine. I'm the oldest. I'm the one with these memories. I'm the one that has value to it. But for those who are, you know, brutally unprepared, right, I think the best meme for it is, okay, gents, we secured our 50 acres in our territory. What has everyone brought to the table in order for us to survive? And it was just like, well, I brought my, you know, Evola books, and that's it, which is always kind of funny. So I think that there is a bit of truth to that, but at the same time, there's a lot there to keep in mind. There's some other questions here. Oh boy, that's a fun question. Why Orthodox and not Catholic? This isn't to say that many people have tried to get me to join the Catholic Church, but I didn't. There's not a lot of Catholic churches near me. I did go to one near me. I the what both in Orthodox and Catholic theology, there's always the idea that a convert doesn't truly feel converted until the Holy Spirit moves through them. And I went to, like I mentioned, even prior to joining the church or making the process to be a catechumen. In some of my very early streams while I was on dialysis, I had mentioned that I would go to Baptist or various other Protestant churches, and then I would go to a Catholic service, and then I would go to an Orthodox service, and trying to feel what felt right. But for me, I mentioned reading up on church history, the theology, the teachings of the Eastern Church Fathers, and the more I've been welcomed in here, I've made my choice. I really, again, Matt Rock, it's not like I want to open up the cath or the schismatic divide. I pray for that to one day be healed. But that's just where my calling is, and is always how it goes. Christ says, with your cross and follow me. That's where I've taken up my cross and I follow him. Everyone, of course, makes a different choice, but again, plenty of people in our circles are Catholic. Charlemagne and John D are Catholic. Turnup and Clossington, for instance, are Lutherans. Mr. Patriarch and I are of the Orthodox Church. So, I mean, we all, regardless of our issues, we know that despite our little theological or ecumenical differences, our bigger problem is we're up against the evil one, and that's what we're dealing with. So that to me doesn't particularly matter, but that's where I ended up. But yeah, so let's take a look here, see what everyone else has been saying. So let's see. Bolero 393 for $4.99 sent a sticker. Well, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. Let's see here. John D asked me, do I consider myself a city boy? Maybe when I first moved here, I probably did for sure. I definitely considered myself more of someone that enjoyed the conveniences of urban living. But now, living out in the middle of nowhere, so to speak, you kind of have to ponder and wonder, is it really worth the gas to drive 25 minutes or so to go get Whataburger and to enjoy all these conveniences that you once used to enjoy? Like when I had my apartment in El Paso, I was like 2 minutes away from like a Sonic and IHOP and a Whataburger. Like you had all your conveniences. There was a Whole Foods right there, But nowadays it's a little different. And I think I prefer this life than I do the city. There's a lot of self-made men out here, and there's a lot of people that take great stock in who they are and where they come from, and I think that matters a lot more. Plus, I get to go fishing a lot more often, so I don't think I consider myself a city boy anymore. I certainly dress like one. I've learned that my aesthetic or my wardrobe is very much associate college professor, but so be it. That doesn't mean I don't have work boots and rubber boots and waders and all that sort of stuff. I have overalls as well. So one of these days I may post a selfie or something like that. I think you should enjoy the fact that I also wear the bee suit and everything, taking care of the bees. That might be a fun picture to share with y'all one day. But yeah, no, plenty of stuff going on as well. Oh boy. Let's see here. Yeah, and this is where I agree with Charlemagne. I will ally with any Christian as long as it's still legal for Dave Rubin to buy children, and that is wholeheartedly the truth. And simple as is that I will ally with, and I think that's something that we talked about on the post-event stream. Is that we would really be okay living under anyone's sort of like governing order or their theological order, because it's going to be a million times better than living in a society where all of Con Inc. supports, Dave Rubin and his husband buying children the same way that, Pete Buttigieg did with them. Like, it's pretty brazen when we can just traffic children and we like applaud it as some disgusting form of parenthood. So yeah, I will ally with any Christian. I will ally with any of them, regardless of their faith or regardless of their church teachings, in order to defeat that. And that's sort of been the theme here, is that we're up against evil, and simple as. But yeah, let's see here. Yeah, concept of wombs for hire. That's absolutely right. So plenty of stuff going on there. Yeah. Oh, not the bees, not the bees. Oh, I certainly enjoy all sorts of Nick Cage references. He's the living actor meme of Oscar quality, but also spending way too much money, so he's got to do crappy films like Five Nights at Freddy's ripoffs. But yeah, we do take care of bees, and I think I'm gonna procure a icon of Saint Ambrose and have that there as well. So that's what matters. Let's see here. Let's see any other interesting stuff here. Um, Charlemagne, I agree with you. I'm just not going to put that out on screen, but yeah, no, it's wholeheartedly true. And I think Settler's Lament said it best. It's just butt marriage. Not a fan. No, thank you. But those are some of the things that I think that have bought that have come into my mind. But Glow in the Dark asks the question: in light of current prices and inflation, the best budget cut of meat and how to prepare for it, or how to prepare it. Well, preparing it, I don't know. I think the best cut is whatever you can hunt on your own. So if you can go fishing and take it with what you can, or if you can hunt wherever you live, then go do it. So lately we've been enjoying venison and taking care of it like that and going that way. But I mean, inflation does make certain things pricey, and I've talked about that in the past. So yeah, to me, if you can hunt and procure it yourself, or if you can have a local relationship with a local butcher, that goes a long way. As for preparing it, I have various recipe books. It just depends. But stock up and go with what you can afford. Someone asks about beekeeping. It is a lot harder than it looks. My father started out with it, and I help him out on occasion, and it is difficult. We've lost quite a few hives over the last maybe 2 years now, but we're getting the hang of it for sure. So that definitely helps. But we're working on it. We're getting better with each year. The two big hives that we have now are doing very well. Bolero asks about the wheat fugees. I like that phrase. I might keep that around. And the answer is, Morgoth's law isn't, in fact, anytime that there's a migrant crisis, it's always going to be non-Europeans migrating into Europe. So they won't be turned away for sure. As simple as that. How do you get into hunting if you didn't grow up in that culture? I want to hunt, but I'm terrified of going into the woods alone and fucking it up. If you go alone, that's fine. Make sure you're wearing the protective gear and know where you're at and have some kind of GPS way so that people can find you. But I mean, I don't go alone. I go with friends, or I go with my father. And he's more outdoorsy than I was growing up. I kind of resented it as a kid, doing scouting and all that, because your father's so involved, right? But now I'm this adult, this grown man, and I've fallen in love with it again. And you just have to ease your way into it. I always recommend that you start with fishing first, then hunting, because fishing is a lot easier to deal with than, say, drawing the gun or drawing the bow to take out what is hopefully going to be your dinner or something that you have planned. But really, you have to ease yourself into it. And because I live out in the country, even though I'm not a particularly, I wasn't really built or grew up in the culture, living out in the middle of nowhere, going out to the middle of nowhere to do it helps a lot. Like we deal with wild boar in Texas. So, sitting in a tree stand for hours on end, putting out, flavored corn or whatever, or leftovers for this thing to come over, take care of, because you really can't eat wild boar after a certain weight limit. Apparently it's the meat's too tough, or like it's really bad for you. So it's a lot easier to get yourself into the mindset of taking your target, lining up, all that. But really just, it's a community that's not as gatekeepy as I thought that it would be. They're kind of accepting and open to more people learning. So, I mean, ask questions and find groups in your area. And if there's a rod and gun club near you or outside of the town or city you live in, I mean, start there. It helps a lot. And also getting acquainted with the tools and the equipment and actually learning how to use them. So don't be the guy that just buys everything and then doesn't know what the hell he's doing. No, just don't be a poser. It's as simple as that. Admit humility and admit ignorance, as you should for anything that you want to get into, and learn and ask questions. Really, that's the benefit of humility. So yeah, that's what I would definitely say for sure. So Plenty of things going on. But let's see here. How about hunting? How about hunting fish? Asks Charlemagne. Well, with a gun. Well, you fire around into the water and it loses its velocity very quickly. If you're going to kill a fish with a gun, I mean, then get a spear gun and just go out into like saltwater fishing and take it out with a spear gun. That would be the best way to do it. But fishing is great, and it's something I enjoy doing, and I also enjoy the fishing videos I do for sure. I love that for the content I put out. Those are actually my favorite videos, and they get the least amount of views and engagement ever. But the fishing videos will continue until the view count improves, so they're not going anywhere. As we wind down now, because we're near an hour and a half, and I was thinking about 90 minutes or so, because I don't know if anyone else is streaming tonight. But again, I do want to take a break this Sunday, as all of us should on the Sabbath. That we are dealing with an interesting time, and that we are living in, of course, in an interesting time. It's always the Chinese saying, right? The curse, may you live in interesting times, and we certainly do. That's for sure. But I think the real benefit is that we doom scroll a lot, and we do hear a lot about what we're dealing with and what kind of evil we're up against, and what, all of the conspiracy theory dot connecting that has become very easy to do because they just openly say it. I think that at the end of the day, it does matter, more so than anything, that we do have our community here, yes, but we also must take necessary actions to do work. And apparently Settler's Lament is streaming later today, I think at 9 p.m. Eastern, because it says 8 o'clock the last time I checked it, my time. I'm in Central. So he'll be with the distributor that's talking about Bill Maher and sort of that kind of question. So be sure to go to watch the Bill Maher stream over at Settler's Lament. There'll be great people there. So yeah, no, by all means. But to sort of get back on track with these final thoughts, that you aren't alone, but at the same time, it's also important for you to find people in your area, because you can't expect someone 500, 600, 1,000 miles away from you to really particularly give you the answer or to guide you the way that you do. And that's something to keep in mind in the back of your head, is to work yourself out and find people in your area. And like I mentioned at the event, and like I've mentioned before, it doesn't have to be necessarily, explicitly political. A fishing club, a emergency response group, or people that you find at church. That's going to go a lot further and things like that. So yeah, do and keep that in mind. And Charlemagne, I'll message him, or I'll at him, and we'll talk about that after the stream. So don't worry, I got you, Charlie. But again, basket weave, meet with others, and do more to do the work. As much as that phrase gets memed, to do the work, it's important for you to do it. If we are going to manage and hold true and not get lost to the doom scrolling and what feels like an overwhelming force, then it will behoove all of us to do the things off the screen, off the computer, off behind the profile picture, and on the ground. So I will leave you all with that. There are plenty of things I think for you all to chew on. You all asked some wonderful questions, and I greatly enjoy catching up with you all. And I'll leave you all here with just a few announcements. I'll have a little OSHA video commentary like I did with the country road driving out soon. And we'll have the Man of God review out as well. It's a fantastic movie, and I highly recommend that you watch it if you get the chance. So I will see you all very soon. Next Sunday, we'll be covering the sort of geopolitics of the internet and the recent things. And that's what we're going to do. And with all of that, I wish you all the very best. God bless you. Be prudent. And I will see you all next time.